They said I was running away. Maybe I was, but when your world burns slow and silent, and no one seems to notice the smoke curling out of your chest, what else are you supposed to do? I didn't leave the city because I hated it. I left because I couldn't breathe in it anymore. The noise, the lights, the meetings, the smiles I wore like armor, none of it was real anymore. I had become a shell in nice clothes, pretending to function. So I packed up my life into 2 boxes, rented a cottage on the edge of nowhere, and left behind the version of me everyone seemed to like. Damn, my name is Emma. And I think I disappeared. A long time before I left, the cottage was small, weathered wood, overgrown garden, uneven floorboards. But it was quiet. Too quiet at first. The kind of silence that makes your thoughts louder. I spent the first few nights lying awake, haunted by echoes of boardrooms and ringing phones that no longer existed, but there was something else here too. A presence. Something breathing, powerful, close. I noticed it on my second morning. The cottage's kitchen window looked out onto a fenced pasture, wide and green, with hills that rolled like waves. And at the far end, standing alone by a rusted gate, was the largest horse I had ever seen. He stood still. Watching, even from a distance, I could feel him watching me. I almost laughed. What was I expecting out here? Deer? Birds? A magical fox to guide me to healing? But the horse didn't blink, didn't graze, didn't shift. He just watched. And something deep in my gut stirred. I didn't go to him that day. Or the next. But every morning, he was there. A titan, said the woman who ran the stable next door when I finally asked. She was wiry, with a lined face and tired eyes. Belongs to my brother. We board him here, but don't go near him. He's unpredictable. Nearly took a man's hand off last year. I nodded, pretending I wasn't intrigued, but I was. The third morning, I stepped outside. I don't know why I did it. Curiosity, maybe. Or loneliness. Or that quiet voice inside me that had gone too long unheard. The air smelled of damp earth and pine. The frost hadn't melted yet. My boots crunched over gravel as I followed the narrow path to the fence line. He was already there, closer now, only a few feet away from the old wooden gate that separated his field from the narrow strip of land behind my cottage. He didn't move as I approached. Just kept those dark eyes on me like he was waiting. I stopped at the gate. He stood on the other side. Neither of us moved. He was massive. Muscled, wild, yet oddly regal. His coat was a deep chestnut, almost black when the light hit it. His mane looked windswept even though the morning was still. A faint white star marked his forehead. And his eyes, God, his eyes, looked like they knew things I didn't. I'm Emma, I said, voice soft. He didn't blink. I guess we're neighbors now. Still nothing. I laughed once, quietly. You're not much of a talker either, huh? And then, slowly, he took a single step forward. I tensed. The stable owner's warning echoed in my head. Unpredictable. Dangerous. Stay away. But he didn't lunge or rear or even lower his head. He just stood there. Like he wanted to be seen, like maybe he saw something in me, too. From then on, it became a routine. I didn't go to the gate every day on purpose, but somehow, I always ended up there. Coffee in hand, hair still tangled from sleep, wearing the oversized sweater that smelled like wood smoke. And every time, he was waiting, never closer than the gate. Never further than a few feet. A quiet constant in the middle of my unraveling. I started to speak to him more. Not expecting answers, not needing them. Just saying things I couldn't say out loud to anyone else. They all think I'm fine, I said once, voice brittle. But I think I forgot how to feel anything at all. He didn't flinch. Just watched. Another day. I used to love painting. Haven't touched a brush in 4 years. Isn't that sad? He tilted his head slightly, like he was listening, and once, whisper soft, do you think people can start over? Even when they've broken something inside themselves? He stepped forward that time, so close I could see my reflection in his eyes. I didn't dare reach out. I was too scared he'd disappear. Late one evening, I sat by the gate long after the sun dipped behind The hills. I didn't want to go back inside. The silence of the cottage had become heavier somehow, weighted by old memories and regrets I hadn't invited. But here, next to this creature that said nothing and everything at once, I could almost breathe. The wind picked up, and I shivered. He stayed close. You don't even know me, I said. But you stay. A long exhale flared his nostrils. Then stillness again. Thank you, I whispered. The wind answered with a low rustle in the grass. That night, I dreamed of running, not away from something, but toward it. The trees blurred past. The wind tore at my clothes. And beside me, galloping with fierce grace, was a chestnut horse with fire in his eyes. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. We just ran. Together. The next morning, I woke to a knock at the door. The stable owner stood there, her face tight. You haven't been feeding him, have you? She asked. What? No, I blinked. Why? He waits by that damn gate like he's expecting you. Won't eat until you show up. It's starting to worry us. I swallowed hard. I haven't touched him. I promise. She sighed. Just be careful. He's not a pet. I know, I said. But part of me wasn't sure anymore. Wasn't sure if he knew that either, because that evening, when I returned to the gate, he was already there, pacing, and when he saw me, he stopped, and he came forward so fast, the earth shook beneath his hooves, and I realized I wasn't just seen. I was known. I didn't mean to go back that evening. Honestly, I thought about staying inside, keeping a little distance. After what the stable owner had said, I felt watched. Not just by Titan, but by the world around him. As if the trees themselves held breath when I walked outside. As if every sound waited to see what I would do next, but the pull was stronger than reason. The minute the sun began to set, I found myself drifting toward the back field, mug of tea in hand, like sleepwalking toward a memory you can't let go of. The cold air bit through my sweater. The damp ground soaked through my socks. I didn't care, and there he was. At the gate. Waiting, still, silent. Eyes locked on mine like I was the only fixed point in his world. I tried not to read into it. But how could I not? This was a horse who barely tolerated his handlers. Who refused to be led. Who had thrown off experienced riders and snapped reins in half. But for me, he stood motionless. Unblinking. Present. Why me? I asked aloud. What do you want from me? He didn't move. Didn't need to. The question hung in the air like mist. And for a moment, I imagined he had an answer, one that couldn't be spoken in words. The next day, I stayed in longer than usual. I told myself I needed rest. That I needed to focus on rebuilding a routine. Maybe start painting again, or open the laptop I hadn't touched in weeks, but nothing held my focus. I couldn't stop glancing at the clock. By 3 p.m., I caved. I slipped on my coat, stepped into the yard, and walked the now familiar path toward the back gate. He was already there, not pacing. Not grazing. Not distracted. Waiting. As I approached, he shifted his weight forward, head lowering slightly, an acknowledgement. His ears flicked toward me. A soft huff of breath warmed the air between us. It was subtle. But it felt like a greeting. I tried not to come, I whispered. I really did. Titan blinked once. Then stepped forward until his massive chest pressed gently against the wooden gate. I froze. It was the closest he'd ever come. My heart thudded against my ribs. The wood creaked between us. One small movement, and he could shove it open, end this strange game of separation. But he didn't. He waited. As if he knew exactly where the line was. As if he respected it. Or maybe he was asking me to cross it. I lifted a trembling hand, hovering just above the gatepost. The moment stretched, tense and fragile, then I reached out slowly, and let my fingertips brush the warm velvet of his nose. He didn't pull away. He leaned in. The world fell silent from that day on. He was always there before me, whether I arrived at dawn or after dusk, whether the air was still or wild with wind. Titan stood at the gate like a sentry. Watching. Waiting. wanting nothing but my presence. That he didn't ask for food. He didn't need touch. Just me. I tried to convince myself it was simple. That I was a novelty, a change from routine, a quiet human in a world full of noise. But the way he watched me, it was more than that. He studied my every move, picked up on emotions I hadn't even admitted to myself. Once, I came out crying, shaking. From a phone call with my sister that left old wounds open and raw. I didn't want him to see me like that. I didn't want anyone to, but when I stepped into the field behind the cottage, he was already at the gate, and this time, he whinnied. It wasn't loud. It wasn't frantic. Just a low, rumbling sound that settled somewhere deep in my chest. He paced once, then pressed his head against the top rail and waited. I walked straight to him and buried my face in his mane. That he didn't flinch. That he just stayed, like he knew something had broken. And that he needed to be the one to hold the pieces. The stable owner noticed. Of course she did. You've got him under a spell, she muttered one afternoon, watching us from a distance. He's never acted like this. Not for anyone. Not even his old trainer. I didn't answer. What could I say? That I was just as confused as she was? That I didn't understand it either. You be careful, she added, softer this time. He's big. And he's got a past. I nodded. But her words felt far away. Because Titan was there again, pacing the line as I approached. He stopped the moment I came into view. And the moment I reached the gate, he exhaled. A soft, trembling sound, like a sigh of relief. That he was waiting. He always waited, and a part of me had started to need that. By the third week, I noticed something strange. The gate had always been slightly crooked, held together with a rusted hinge and a heavy chain looped twice for reinforcement. But now, the top rail was warped. The wood splintered in places. As if something had leaned on it. Or pushed. I stared at it for a long moment. Titan stood a few feet back, grazing as if nothing had changed. But his ears were tipped toward me. Alert. Listening. Did you do that? I asked, touching the splintered wood. He didn't answer, obviously, but when I turned to leave, he followed me. Not aggressively, just 3 slow steps toward the gate. Then he stopped. Watching me walk away. The next morning, the damage was worse. The hinge had shifted. The chain was stretched tighter. Something had tried to open it. Hard. I called the stable. The owner came down, examined the gate, and muttered something under her breath. He's been acting restless, she admitted. Pacing the fence line. At night. Even kicked a stall door 2 nights ago. Why? She looked at me. Her eyes narrowed slightly. I was going to ask you. That night, I stayed up late, lights off, curtains drawn. I sat by the window, mug of tea in hand, watching the moonlight drape across the field. He was there, standing still, facing the gate. He didn't move for nearly an hour. Then, just past midnight, he stepped forward. Slow. Deliberate. He pressed his shoulder against the wood. Not hard. Just enough to feel it groan beneath his weight. I held my breath. Another push. The gate shifted slightly, and then, he stopped. Backed away, and looked directly at the window where I Saturday the next morning, I found hoof marks in the mud, deep ones, right up against the gate. He hadn't left the field. Not yet, but he had tried, and I couldn't decide if that terrified me or made me feel more seen than I ever had in my life. There are moments in life where everything narrows, where the world falls silent, and all that exists is the weight of a single breath. I didn't know it then. But I was about to have one of those moments, and it would start with the sound of splintering wood. The morning began like all the others, still, gray, and a little too quiet. I hadn't slept much. My dreams had been scattered, flashing images of dark eyes, hoofs pounding in mud, a door creaking open that was never supposed to. I sat at the window for nearly an hour, half expecting not to see him. After the night before, after the way he had pushed the gate, I was certain someone from the stable would have moved him. Locked him up. Taken control, but there he was standing exactly where he always stood, waiting. Only this time, he wasn't still. He was pacing. Restless. Head tossing slightly. Ears flicking forward and back like he was listening for something that wasn't there. I stepped outside before I even realized I'd made the decision. My hands were shaking, the gate looked worse than yesterday, the top rail hung at an odd angle. One of the hinges had bent just enough to show the age in the metal. The chain held, but only just. I stopped 2 feet from it, my eyes on Titan. That he stopped pacing when he saw me, and then he took a step. Then another. And another, until there was no fence between us but the broken gate. I should have backed away. I didn't. I couldn't, because something in me recognized the truth before my mind caught up to it. He wasn't approaching like a horse. He wasn't charging or posturing or trying to dominate space. He was coming to me slow, careful, deliberate, and the closer he came, the less air I had. I'd never seen eyes like his, burning, soft, wild, and ancient all at once. They pinned me to the earth, not with fear, but with gravity. As if he could see the bruised, quiet parts of me I thought I'd buried. As if he wasn't afraid of them. He reached the gate and stopped. Right there. Right where the wood was cracked. He leaned into it, just barely, and the gate creaked beneath his weight. I took a step forward before I knew what I was doing. My hand rose slowly, trembling, and this time, I didn't stop at his nose. I let my fingers trail along the side of his face, down his jaw, across the edge of his neck, warm, solid, alive. He exhaled, and it hit me like a sigh I hadn't let out in months. I shouldn't be doing this, I whispered. Titan blinked slowly, then leaned his weight further into the gate, just enough to make it groan. I dropped my hand, and he took another step. The chain strained. I stepped back. Just one step. But it felt like a chasm had opened between us. He froze, his eyes didn't change, but the tension in his body did, like he'd felt something shift. Like he'd realized he had come too close. No, I said softly. It's not you. I don't know what to do with this. With you. With me, with the ache building in the space between. I stayed outside longer than usual. I didn't want to leave him, not with the energy humming in the air like a storm waiting to break, but eventually I had to. I turned slowly, stepping back toward the house. He didn't follow this time. He just stood there, chest pressed lightly to the wood, watching me leave. I didn't know what he was waiting for, but I was starting to wonder if it was me who needed to cross the line. That evening, I opened the drawer in the kitchen, the one I hadn't dared touch since I arrived. Inside were my brushes, my paints, a sketchbook with pages still white and sharp-edged. I stared at them for a long time, then I took them out. It started as a shape, just the curve of a jawline, the suggestion of a mane, but once I started, I couldn't stop. Titan spilled out of me in brushstrokes and color, in shadow and flame. The eyes came last, and they nearly undid me. Because I couldn't make them look away. He was there. In the paint. In the room. In me, and I realized something I hadn't dared admit. I needed him. Not just for comfort, not just for company, but for some deeper part of myself I'd lost long ago. He reminded me that I was still alive. 3 nights later, the storm came, the kind that doesn't just roll in, it descends. Like a curtain of wind and noise crashing down from the sky. The cottage shook with it. The windows rattled. The trees outside screamed with every gust. I was sitting on the floor, sketchbook in hand, when I heard it. A metallic snap. A thud. Then, nothing. My chest clenched. I ran to the back window and threw it open. The gate was gone. The chain lay in the mud, twisted and broken. One hinge was hanging loose. The other was gone completely, and Titan was nowhere in sight. I grabbed my coat and ran outside. The wind cut through me like knives, and the rain slapped against my skin, but I didn't care. I stumbled across the field, heart in my throat, and then I saw him at the edge of the trees, just beyond the field, standing still, head lifted against the wind, body lit by a flash of lightning. I called out. He turned, and then, he moved faster than I'd ever seen him, straight toward me. I froze. My boots sank into the mud. I couldn't move. He's too big. He's not stopping. But he did. He skidded to a halt just feet from me, mud flying around us, his chest heaving, breath loud in the wind, and then, slowly, he stepped forward, not aggressively. Not wildly. Deliberately, toward me, toward the woman he had shoved a gate open to find I couldn't breathe that he stopped right in front of me, pressed his head gently into my chest, and stayed there. The storm screamed around us. But I didn't hear it, because all I could hear was the sound of him breathing, and the rhythm of my heart, finally matching his. They found me the next morning, soaked, shivering, pressed against the massive body of a stallion that wasn't supposed to be out. He could have killed you. The stable owner screamed, dragging a coat over my shoulders. I didn't answer, because I didn't feel afraid. I felt awake. Titan stood beside me, still as stone, as if he'd been guarding me all night. His coat was damp, his mane tangled with leaves and rain. But his eyes were clear, focused. He didn't flinch when hands reached for me. He didn't bolt when a second man brought a lead rope. He simply stared forward, and he let them take him. I wanted to call out, to protest. But I couldn't find my voice. Not while my teeth still chattered and the storm's echo still roared in my chest. Go inside, the woman snapped. We'll talk later. But I already knew she was going to take him away. Hours passed. I sat curled on the floor of the cottage, wrapped in a blanket, the fire crackling too loudly in the silence. The storm had broken. Sunlight streamed through the window like nothing had happened, but everything had happened. He had broken through the gate. He had run to me. He had touched me with such terrifying gentleness, and stayed. I kept replaying it in my head, the way his body moved through the storm like it wasn't there. The way he pressed his face to my chest, like he needed to feel my heartbeat to calm his OWNIT hadn't felt like instinct. It hadn't felt like coincidence. It had felt like choice. That afternoon, she returned, the stable owner. Face hard. Boots muddy. A paper in her hand. I don't know what kind of spell you've put on that animal, she began, but it ends now. My throat tightened. You think this is normal, she continued, waving the paper. He shoved a locked gate off its hinges. He ran through a storm like a warhorse. And for what? You? He didn't hurt me, I said. That's not the point. Then what is the point? I stood now, my voice stronger than I'd expected. That he should have been dangerous? That he wasn't is somehow the problem? She looked at me like I'd lost my mind. You don't understand what you're dealing with. That horse is not tame. He's barely controllable. My brother only keeps him because no one else will take him. Then why is he still here? I asked, stepping closer. Why not sell him? Or retire him? She hesitated. Just a beat. He's too proud, she muttered. Thinks Titan just needs the right hand again. Someone to break him. I felt something twist inside me. Break him? The words clanged like iron in my chest. He's not broken, I said. He just doesn't belong to anyone who listens. You're not a trainer, she snapped. I never claimed to be. You're not even trying to control him. I don't want to control him. That silenced her. The space between us thickened. Then she thrust the paper into my hand. What's this? I asked, a warning. From the stable. One more incident like last night, and they'll have him sedated. Or worse. My blood ran cold. Worse? He's a liability, she said flatly. A danger to himself. To others. You think everyone will just sit back and watch while he charges across property lines in a storm? I swallowed. He came to me, I said. He didn't run. He came to me. She stepped closer now. Her voice dropped to a warning growl. Then maybe it's time you stop giving him a reason to. And with that, she turned and left. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at the window, eyes locked on the pasture beyond the broken gate, now repaired with heavy iron chains and a padlock. They'd locked him in, but I still felt him watching, even. From across the darkness, I could feel the shape of him, his presence humming like electricity under my skin. The paper she'd left sat on the table. I couldn't look at it again. Instead, I opened my sketchbook and I drew him. Not as an animal. But as something more. A sentinel. A guardian. A soul that had waited too long to be seen. The next morning, I walked to the field. The wind was sharp. The grass still wet with storm dew. I wore my thickest sweater and carried nothing but my voice. He was there, head down. Stiff. When he saw me, he didn't move. Not at first, then, slowly, he turned. His body was tense. His flanks twitching. But his eyes locked onto mine the second they found me, and he stepped forward, only to stop short at the reinforced gate. The chains held tight. The padlock gleamed. I stepped closer. Hey, I said softly. He exhaled, almost a whimper. I reached through the rails and let my fingers brush his cheek. He pressed into them, and something inside me cracked open. I don't want them to take you, I whispered. But I don't know how to stop them. Titan stilled. As if listening. If trying to understand. I wish you could tell me what to do. He didn't move, but the air between us thickened with something more than silence. Something like knowing. That afternoon, I went into town. I didn't know what I was looking for. Maybe a sign. Maybe just distance. The main street was quiet, shop windows still dusted with storm residue, people moving slowly, as if the world hadn't fully returned to normal yet. Neither had I. I bought coffee. Sat alone in the corner of a bookshop cafe. Tried to pretend I wasn't constantly checking the time, wondering if he was at the gate again. Even now, pacing, waiting. And I returned just before dusk, and that's when everything unraveled. The gate was open again, but this time, he wasn't there. Not in the field. Not by the fence. Not in sight. Panic gripped my chest. I ran, faster than I ever had, boots sliding in the mud, heart slamming against my ribs. Titan. I shouted into the wind. Titan. No answer. I reached the woods. No hoofprints. No broken branches. Just emptiness. And then, far off, toward the cliffs above the river, I saw movement. A shape, too big for a deer. Too solid for wind. It was him, but he wasn't alone. A truck was parked near the tree line. 2 men were there. One held a rope. The other, a long pole. And Titan, cornered, flanks dark with sweat, was rearing. No, I breathed. One of the men swung the pole. Titan lunged, but there was nowhere to run. I didn't think. I ran, straight into the field. Through the trees. Toward them. A stop. I screamed. The men turned. Titan's eyes snapped to me, and then, he broke free. One jerk, one twist of his massive neck, and the rope fell loose. He charged, but not at them. He ran past them, straight to me. My arms flew out. I braced for impact, but he skidded to a halt inches away, mud flying, breath ragged, and for one perfect second, we were the only 2 beings in the world. The men backed off. One cursed. The other muttered something about untrainable and putting him down. I stepped in front of Titan, heart pounding. If you touch him again, I said, you'll have to go through me. He stood behind me like a shadow. Solid. Unmoving, and I knew in that moment, he wouldn't run. Not as long as I stood my ground, and I wasn't going to move, not anymore. They told me it would be my fault. If he hurts someone, it's on you. If he gets out again, we'll call the authorities. If you don't stay away, he won't stop. I didn't respond. I didn't argue. Because they were right about one thing. He wouldn't stop. Not for fences. Not for rules. Not even for himself. Not if he thought I was in danger, because the night he shoved the gate open, he didn't come for freedom. He came for me. They kept him in the stone barn after the incident in the woods, chained at the stall door like a criminal. He wasn't even allowed to graze. The stable owner avoided my calls. The brother never showed his face. I could only watch him from the edge of the property, behind a chain-link fence that hadn't been there before. He stood at the stall window whenever I came. Always watching. Always waiting, but he didn't whinny. Didn't pace. Just waited like he knew I was trying to find a way, like he believed I would, and I wanted to. God, I tried. I called rescues. Sanctuaries. I begged the stable owner to release him to someone else, anyone else. She shook her head every time. And not our call, she said. He belongs to my brother. And he says Titan stays until he's sold or sedated. But he's not safe here, I argued. She just laughed once, dry and cold. Then don't come back. I stood outside his stall for the last time that night, hand on the gate that he stepped toward me. I couldn't reach him through the bars. He couldn't lower his head enough to touch me. But we both stayed, breathing in the same silence. I'm sorry, I whispered. I don't know how to fix this. His ears flicked once, and then, slowly, he lowered himself to the straw floor of the stall, just so he could rest his head against the gate. The gesture broke something open in me, and I knew I couldn't leave him behind. Not again. 2 nights later, the storm returned, almost like the first one. Same howling wind. Same distant thunder. Same veil of mist rolling over the hills like breath over glass, only this time, I was ready. I'd been waiting, watching and plotting every movement the stable workers made. Timing the shifts. Noting which locks were used. Which windows were left unlatched. I wasn't proud of it, but I didn't care, because some fences aren't meant to hold, and some lives aren't meant to be caged. It was just after midnight when I made my move. No flashlight. No phone. Just a pair of bolt cutters borrowed from an old neighbor and a satchel of apples I'd hidden beneath my coat. I moved like a ghost across the field, heart thudding so loud I thought it would give me away, but no one came in. No lights flicked on. No shouts behind me, only the wind, and then, I reached the barn. He was already waiting. I saw his silhouette through the slats in the stall, head up, ears pricked. As if he'd known I would come. Hey, I breathed. Titan didn't move. But his eyes followed my every step. I crept to the padlock. Slipped the cutters over the loop. 1 snap, the sound cracked through the barn like lightning. I froze to no one stirred. I lifted the bar, pushed the door open, and for a moment, we just stared at each other. You ready? I whispered. Titan didn't rear. Didn't bolt. He stepped out, carefully. Deliberately, and followed me into the night. We didn't run, not at first. We walked, side by side, through the mist-covered field, down the slope behind the pasture, across the shallow stream that cut through the woods. He stayed with me the whole time. And no halter. No rope, just trust. It wasn't until we reached the clearing above the ridge that I realized how far we'd come. The valley stretched out below us, cloaked in silver and shadow. The sky cracked with distant thunder. But it felt quiet. Sacred, almost free. I turned to him. You did it, I whispered. You got out. Titan shifted forward, and then, gently, he touched his nose to my chest. I felt the thud of my heart against his breath, and in that moment, I knew he wasn't just a horse. He was the piece of me I'd forgotten. The wildness I'd buried. The quiet truth I hadn't dared to speak. I had run from my old life to disappear. But he had found me. So I could come back to myself. But peace never lasts long, does it? The headlights came fast, slashing through the mist like knives. A truck engine roared in the distance. Voices called out. Flashlights flicked through the trees. They're coming, I whispered. Titan tensed beside me, and then, he turned, and ran straight down the ridge. Into the night, and I knew, without a doubt, he wasn't fleeing. He was leading them away from me. I collapsed at the top of the hill, tears stinging my face. The next hour was chaos, shouts echoing, engines roaring. Dogs barking in the distance, but they didn't find him. They searched until dawn. Nothing. He vanished into the wild. No tracks. No trace, just gone, and I never saw him again, not in the barn. Not in the pasture. Not even in the woods. Titan was gone, but he'd left something behind. A story. A gate. And me, no longer hollow. Weeks passed, spring broke through the frost. And the field began to bloom. The stable remained locked down. The man who owned Titan finally sold the property. I heard rumors, whispers of a lawsuit, of liability, of someone losing their license. I didn't care, because I was painting again. I was living again, and every time I stepped outside, I half expected to see him, just beyond the fence line. Watching. Waiting, but I knew better. He had run. Because he had finally remembered who he was, and so had I. They say he was dangerous. That he broke fences. That he didn't obey, but I'll tell you what really happened. He shoved the gate open, just to get to me. And it wasn't violence. It wasn't instinct. It was love, the kind that doesn't speak. That doesn't ask. That just comes when you need it most, the kind that tears down every wall, even the ones you've built inside yourself.